Most respected Thai, dear Sangha, today is the 3rd of October in the year 2019. We're in the Upper Hamlet on our day of monastic day in the 3-month retreat. And we will listen to 3 sounds of the bell. Dear brothers, dear sisters, thank you for your feedback since last Thursday. I realize that when I hear feedback, I'm a little bit afraid. And I ask myself, why do I feel afraid? And it's not because I don't want to hear that I've done something not right. My fear is that I won't be able to do it better. So you give me feedback and say, could you do this? I'm afraid I won't be able to do it. So that is my fear. So if you see that today I don't speak according to your feedback, it's not because I don't want to, but maybe I just don't have the capacity. And this is what happens with shining light sometimes. You get the feedback, but you don't yet have the capacity to do what you've been asked to do. Not because you don't want to. Anyway, that feedback, it always, it waters the seed. It sows the seed, and even though you can't do exactly straight away, it still stay there. And one day it will blossom like a flower. So I have feedback. I should give more concrete examples. I think that's very good feedback, and I really agree with it. But how concrete I will be, that I can't promise. I'll do my best. So we are studying the Chinese Dharmapada, and we're on chapter 11, chapter about our mind. Thai has translated as mastering our mind and our thinking. So if we go back to the first verse, we will see that it's difficult to guard. Nan ho, difficult to guard. So we talk about guarding our mind. And sometimes we talk about protecting our mind. And do we know what we mean when we say, guard my mind? Last week we sang the song guarding the six senses, guarding your eyes, etc. And your mind is the sixth sense. So we learn to guard our mind. That is, you don't want your mind to run in certain directions. The example that is given in the sutra is when the Venerable Shariputra comes to the Buddha and says, Lord Buddha, I recognize that you are the number one Buddha. Compare with all the Buddhas in the past and all the Buddhas in the present and the future. There is no Buddha like you. You are the best. And what did the Buddha say? Shariputra, don't say that. How did you meet the past Buddhas? Did you meet the future Buddhas to be able to say that I'm the best? And Shariputra had to admit that no, he didn't meet those past Buddhas. Then he said to the Buddha, but the reason I say that is because when I observe the Buddha, I see that the Buddha knows how to guard his six senses. His eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and mind. Like no one else is able to guard them. And then Shariputra gave an example. It's like the walls around the city. And in the wall there's always the gate. And there is a guard that is posted day and night on the gate. And he has to see everything, everybody who comes in and out. If it's a cat or a rat or something small, he just let it go in, crawl under the gate, it doesn't matter. But if it's something big, like a human being, he has to recognize, is this a friend or an enemy? Is this person belong to our town, our city or not? And then we'll decide, shall I let that person in or not let that person in? So that is the example of guarding our mind. Things come up from manas, come up from the store consciousness. And we have to know, should we let this continue to come into our mind, or should we say to it, sorry, you can't, we don't want you in our mind, and not continue in that way. Or at least, if we want to continue, we have to have something else there with us when we continue with that. And that something else is mindfulness. So mindfulness of this memory, mindfulness of where this memory is taking me. Is it taking me down a road that I've been down hundreds of times and I know I don't want to go down that road again? And when I notice that, I will stop and not go down that road. So this is guarding the mind. And it says that it's not easy to guard the mind. Because why? We have these habit energies. We have this automatic pilot that we put on, and when we're on automatic pilot, our thinking go round and round and round like that. And we're not there enough to be able to take care of what's coming up in our mind. So as well as saying guard your mind, you could also say take care of what is coming up in your mind. Hold it back. Your mind wants to go in a certain direction. Why does it want to go in that direction? Maybe it's just a habit energy for it to go. And maybe our ancestors have gone in that direction. And in neuroscience nowadays, people talk about neural pathways. In your brain you have kind of electrical circuits or whatever. You have messages sent from one neuron to the next. And it's a pathway going from one neuron to the next. It's a kind of chemical, electrical pathway. And you've been down that pathway often, so you can go down it very easily. It's like you want to make a pathway into the woods. And the first time you go on the pathway, it's not easy, because you have to move all the brambles and plants out of the way. But when you've been down there several times, it's easy to go down. So it's the same with the pathway. And that is why it's difficult to hold back, because it's just going on its usual pathway. So another way to guard our mind, which the Buddha has taught us, is to practice the first establishment of mindfulness of the body. Although you think that the mind and the body are two different things, actually practicing mindfulness of our body guards our mind. Because when we are mindful of our body, then we're not carried away by our thinking, because all our attention and our energy is focused on being mindful of our body. So by using the gathas, by using the breathing, the mindful breathing and the walking, then your mind will not wander away, because your mind and your body have become one. Your mindfulness of your body means that you're caring for your body and your mind at the same time. So you don't necessarily just have to sit in meditation and watch what's coming up in your mind in order to guard your mind. If you're doing the cooking or the gardening and you're doing that with all your attention and all your mindfulness, then you're already guarding your mind also. And you will notice too if what is coming up in your mind. If your mind wanders from your body, you will notice what is happening. There is a situation which happens sometimes when the mind and the body become separated. All of us, we get times during the day when our mind wanders off away from our body. Especially when we're working on the computer. But that is a kind of normal normal condition, one that we don't want to keep happening for too long, but it does happen to all of us. But sometimes what happens is that the mind and the body become separate in a more permanent way. There are certain kinds of wrong meditation. Like people think, oh, it would be so nice if I could be free of my body. And so they practice in some way that their mind leaves their body. So that is taught by some teachers. And we have to never go down that path. It's very dangerous. You go mad if you do that. Your mind, it's not natural to force your mind to be separate from your body. So we should remember that meditation is always to bring our mind and our body back together. So that's one case, practicing wrong meditation. And if ever you feel that in your meditation something not quite right, that your mind is going off in a way it shouldn't be, you should come to your mentor straight away. Or if you don't have a mentor, you should come to your brother or sister who you have confidence in and ask, how can you meditate differently? And then there's another case, not just wrong meditation, but a case when people have been in what we call a traumatic situation. Maybe in a situation of war, as a refugee, escaping when your life is in danger constantly. Bombs are falling around you, and your mind no longer feels safe in your body. And so your mind has a tendency to want to leave your body. And also in the case of sexual abuse, that is for a child or somebody who's sexually abused, that is a situation of great danger when the mind will not want to be in the body. So it becomes that kind of real separation. And it's not easy to bring them back together in this case. Even to follow the breathing is not easy for a person who really has that kind of separation. It's not easy to follow the breathing, to take mindful steps. And in our own time, I think psychologists, psychotherapists, they recognize this kind of split that happened, and they find ways to help the person bring their mind and body back together. Like, for instance, you really need to feel your body. And sometimes feeling the breathing is not enough, so they have to do exercises. Maybe you heard about this in neuroscience retreat, I don't know. Exercises like this, to really feel your body. Yeah, and accompanied with when the memory comes up and things like that. So, what I'm coming to is that because some younger brothers and sisters have asked me, in our monastic sangha, not very often, but from time to time, there may be someone who really has a very deep aspiration to be a monk or a nun, but have been through some trauma, or maybe done some wrong meditation. And do we really, in our Dharma doors, do we have enough equipment to be able to help somebody in that situation? Or do we need to ask someone who's trained in dealing with that kind of situation to also give a hand? I think that maybe we need the Sometimes we need the intervention of someone who's trained. And I think that along with the mindful breathing and the mindful walking, the thing combined with we can really help. We can really help somebody. I really don't want to be saying in a Dharma talk what we should be doing or what we shouldn't be doing, but because I've received that question, I feel that I should address it in some way. And it's up to the Sangha to decide for each individual case. But one thing I really wish is that somebody who we see in the Sangha, that somebody is in a monastic brother or sister is in a really difficult situation psychologically, we should really give our attention to that and not just say, oh well, in the end the practice will help and everything will be okay if they just keep in the Sangha and they do the daily practice. I think we need to sit down as Dharma teachers and say, how can we help this sister or this brother? Because it could be something serious, it could be something very deep that will lead to a lot of suffering. So when we as as mentors, see something like that in the Sangha, we should come together, discuss, and then see what way we can help. And if we are able to ask for help when we feel that we've been through a trauma and we see that we are having a lot of suffering psychologically, we don't feel ashamed and think, oh, well, I'm not practicing well enough and it's my fault, but we can actually come to our mentor and say, I think I need some help, and yeah, ask like that. Thank you. On Sunday, last Sunday, Sister Tự Nghiêm mentioned a sutra called the Vitakka Sutta, when the Buddha talked about before he became the Buddha, his memory of the practice. And in that sutra he also advised his monks, don't practice like I did before. And in other places we see that in the Vinaya, in the first Khandaka, the Maha Khandaka, we also see the Buddha teaches his disciples, don't do it like I did, because it's not helpful. Like forcing your mind, really, really forcing yourself when you practice. And I remember when I was practicing in India, I practiced the wrong kind of meditation. I used to force myself. I used to sit for a very long time, maybe 3 hours, 2 hours, and it was as if I was forcing my mind to go in a certain direction. And in that Vitakka Sutta, the Buddha was talking about forcing his mind in the direction of thinking wholesome thoughts and not thinking unwholesome thoughts. So one day I met the Lama with whom I'd taken refuge, and I was in a retreat with him. and he told his attendant to come and get me. And he said to me, "How are you practicing sitting meditation?" And I told him, he said, "Don't do like that." He said, "Stop." He said, "Someone like you're only a beginner. You can't possibly sit for 3 hours. Force your mind for 3 hours. 20 minutes is your limit." Huh? So it's lucky you have a teacher who can see things like that, and in the time, and teach you to go in different direction. And in the time of the Buddha, there was a monk called Sona, who'd been a musician before he became a monk. And the Buddha also observed, when listening to his voice, the voice of his disciple, there's something not quite right. And so he knew that Sona was making too much effort, forcing his mind. And therefore he said to Sona, "Come and see him." And he said, "You remember when you're a musician and you tune your instrument, and if the string is too tight, what will happen?" And Sona said, "It'll break. And if it's too loose, what will happen? And you won't get any sound out of it." So somehow we need to go the middle way when we practice diligence, not force ourselves. If you put something very hard in your mouth to chew, maybe your teeth are still good, but and you bite it really hard, you could break your teeth. But if you put something hard in your mouth and you leave it in your mouth till the saliva start to make it soft, and then you chew it very gently, then maybe you'll be successful, you'll be able to chew it. So it's like that with our practice. We have to go in slowly. And the Buddha gave the example of the ocean. You don't just, when you can't swim, you don't just jump off the boat into the ocean. You go in slowly, your feet get wet, your knees get wet, and then you try and paddle about while your feet can still touch the ground, the seabed. So our practice should be like that. Don't ever force anything. And so when we talk about guarding our mind, this is something we have to do with our joy and our gentleness. We don't have to be a prison guard, exactly. And so the first verse, it uses the word straight. You make your mind straight. And I think maybe from some feedback I received that people didn't really understand what is meant by straight. I think it means upright, which means well-behaved. But here I don't think that's what straight means. I think straight means it doesn't lean. And it's not biased. It's not prejudiced. It's not leaning in the way of views and wrong perceptions. So it's very close to the meaning of the middle way. The Buddha once told his disciples, you shouldn't make rules for the rains retreat. Sometimes some monks staying together, they decided they'd make some rules for their rains retreat, special rules. We will practice noble silence the whole rains retreat. We will not do the novice ordination because if we do novice ordination, we have to talk to the aspirants. and so we won't do the novice ordination. One of the aspirants was the nephew of the lady Visakha, Megara's mother, Lop Mao. Yeah. She's a very important lay disciple of the Buddha. She was a donor, and she was very concerned with the way the monastics lived. She said that one meal a day isn't always enough for the sick monks. And the monks in cold days, they need to have breakfast. And I will offer rice soup to every monk and nun in Shravasti. Anyway, she was very concerned about the monk and the nun. And when she heard that her aspirant nephew, who was meant to be becoming a monk, wasn't now being able to become a monk, in that time, she wasn't happy and went and told the Buddha. And the Buddha said, "Monks, you shouldn't do that. That's not the way to have the rains retreat." So sometimes we make rules for ourselves in the rains retreat. So Thai taught us that in the rains retreat we don't go outside the boundaries. And that doesn't mean just the physical boundaries. It also means we don't go outside on the internet. So many sisters, they really thought this is correct, and so they made a rule for themselves. We won't touch the internet for 3 months. So that's very good, but there was a problem. Because these sisters, they had to go to a language class. This is something to do with the law. They couldn't avoid the language class. And one day the teacher said, "You send your homework to me by email." And then they say, "No, I can't possibly do that. I made this vow." So it made quite a lot of difficulty. Yeah. And also the teacher, they send the lesson by the internet. So when you hear something like that and you know that this is the law of the country and so on, of course you have to drop your idea. Yeah. And so you have to say, well, I made that vow, but now I have to modify it. As far as the language class is concerned, I go on the internet, but no other reason will I go on the internet. But if you keep to your idea, I'm not going to go on the internet, you can imagine there'll be quite a lot of trouble for you and maybe for others. So keeping the mind straight doesn't mean that some rule you make for yourself, you just keep it whatever. Yeah, you can be flexible. Because keeping the mind straight means really not being caught in views. And if your mind is straight, you can really listen deeply and know what you should or should not do. Because your mind is not being pulled in this direction or pulled in that direction, but you can look directly at what is happening, at the situation as it is, without being pulled away. So that is what is meant by straight here. So the second verse is saying that the mind is unsteady. So we all have a deep aspiration that we want to keep our bodhicitta alive. And in order to do that, we need to keep reminding ourselves. It's not just enough that when you receive the monastic vow and you say the gatha 3 times, you feel very deeply your bodhicitta at that time. But your bodhicitta, because the mind is, like it says here, the mind is fickle, it's unsteady. It won't stay, it's impermanent. So that is why we need to keep reminding ourselves. And if we didn't keep in touch with suffering, maybe the suffering in ourselves and the suffering in the world, then our bodhicitta is less strong. Occasionally I have to look at the news, read about what's happening in the world, because when I see the depth of the suffering, it keeps my bodhicitta strong. I really want to practice in order for this situation to be transformed. And I know that what is happening out in the world is not separate from my own mind, from my own practice. And if in our family, our blood brothers or sisters, or our mother or father, they have difficulties and suffering, that is also something that can keep our bodhicitta strong, because we really want to practice to help our parents, our siblings. And we know that we have a close connection to them, so that even if they're living thousands of miles away, our practice will still, the energy of our practice, we can still offer it up and it will arrive at our family. So sometimes it's not the best thing to go and be with your family in a lot of suffering if your practice is not very strong. The best thing to do is really have the aspiration and do the practice every day, and then send the energy back. So the mind is unsteady. We make a vow, but we need to keep making our vow. Hard to grasp means you can't take hold of it, because it's not something material. I can take hold of the microphone because it's made of matter, but I can't take hold of my mind like that. And I can't take hold of it and put it where I want it to go, or direct it where I want it to go. It's hard to do that. But with the practice I can. The practice of mindfulness I can. And the second line we could translate as saying, it just goes where it likes. It just goes where it wants to go. Our mind, our thinking goes where it wants to go. Because that is its habit energy. That is the neural pathway which is used to going on. But the wise person, that is the person who has insight, holds it back. And here we talk about being master of oneself. And when you say that I'm master of myself, what does it mean? What does myself mean? Myself means my body, my feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Myself means my eyes, ears, nose, and so on. So being master of myself, give me the freedom. Avalokiteshvara is called the Từ Tai. Ishvara means master, master of yourself. Being compassionate means you need to be master of yourself. When you listen deeply to someone who is not happy with you, who is giving you feedback that you would rather not hear, the important thing is to be master of yourself. It's master of your ears and of your thinking. And then you can listen, and you can listen to what the other person is saying, and also what is not being said. What lies underneath what this person is telling me? What lies underneath the perceptions that this sister or brother has of me? And when we see what lies underneath, because we are master of ourselves as we listen, then we will see maybe there's the suffering of that other person. And that suffering has been partly caused by me. I didn't mean to cause suffering, but because I didn't understand the suffering of the other person, I watered the seeds of suffering in the other person. So now they're telling me about how I make them suffer. And when I see that, I can keep my compassion. So listening deeply, Avalokiteshvara is one who is master of himself, master of herself. Control of the mind is wholesome. Notice it? It's wholesome to be able to control your mind. This means that controlling our mind is a wholesome mental formation. We know we have 51 mental formations, but Thai added more mental formations to those. And one of the ones Thai added was what we looked at last time, is Chitta Kamaniya. And Kamanaya, Chitta Kamanaya. Chitta Kamanaya is being able to do something with your mind, being able to control your mind. So that is a mental formation. Sometimes we come up and we do it, and sometimes it doesn't come up and we don't control our mind. And then we express our anger or our jealousy or whatever. So how to develop that neural pathway that helps us to be able to control our mind. So when we get situations when the seeds in us we don't want to be watered are being watered, we are able to go on that pathway and control our mind. Very often it's about coming back to your body. One brother told me when that happened, he put his hand on his knee and presses the acupoint on his knee, around his knee, to help him control his mind. But that is development of a neural pathway. When you've done it the first time you do it, it may not work. But when you've done it a few times, you get used to doing it, and it's easier and quicker. So neuroscientists say our brain is plastic. We can make new neural pathways. That is something proved by science, so we don't have to have faith that that is so. It's been proved. So several times in the sutra it says that the mind is subtle. Actually the word also means very small, microscopic. Like certain things that you can't see, you have to have a microscope in order to be able to see them. But I don't think it means exactly that you can't see it, but what it means is that it's too small to see. But what it means is that we're not used to being able to see or to be aware of what's happening in our mind. It goes where it likes. This is the second time I said that. And it also repeat about guarding oneself. And here it says that when we can restrain our mind, restrain means hold it back so it doesn't go back down a pathway that we don't want it to go down, that we've been down before. We don't want to go down that pathway. We attain peace and joy. And in the Chinese you just see the one word, it means peace. And in Thai's translation you say peace and happiness. And in the Pali, it says, attain happiness. So they translated happiness from Pali into Chinese as peace. Actually, if we don't have peace, we can't have happiness. And if we don't have happiness, we can't have peace. The two things, they go together. But sometimes we don't like the word happiness because we think we don't deserve it. So we prefer to put the word peace. So whenever in the past, I used to wish my mother happiness. She said, no, don't wish me peace. I said, that's two things, same. But I think she thought maybe she didn't deserve happiness. But happiness is our birthright. And when we have peace, we are happy. So put them both in is very good. Of course, we can be aware of our mental formation. When we talk about mind, we're talking about mental formation. So there's this business of being on automatic pilot. So when we can, it's good that in a way that we can learn to do things so that we don't have to think. Brushing our teeth is an example. When we're small, we learn how to brush our teeth, and in the beginning we have to do it very mindfully because we haven't learnt how to do it. But once our motor neurons or whatever have the memory of how to brush your teeth, then we can brush our teeth and we don't have to be really there to do it. So we are on automatic pilot when we brush our teeth. We just let it happen. And this is when we say that the mind is just going off on its own. It means it's you're on automatic pilot. You're brushing your teeth, but your mind has gone off on its own. It's gone off without your body, without your mindfulness, without your awareness. And when it goes off on its own like that, it can go very far. So during the time you're brushing your teeth, your mind might have gone to New York or a long way, or it might have gone into what will happen after the winter retreat, what will I do at Tet, and things like that. And this means it's gone very far into the future, or it can go very far in space. So it repeats the thing again, which we can't see it. It's not made of matter. So we have to restrain it and keep it on the path. If your mind is accompanied by the mental formation of awareness or mindfulness, then it can't go alone, and then it is safe. Then it's protected. So if you like, in your sitting meditation, there's two kinds of concentration. There's one kind of concentration when you decide what you're going to concentrate on. Today I will concentrate on impermanence. So during my sitting meditation I will concentrate on the impermanence of my body and my feelings and so on. But there's the other kind of concentration when you say, I will just be aware of what comes up in my mind. I will follow my breathing and be aware of what comes up. So it's good to practice both kinds of concentration. The one which you know in advance and you have a certain path that you will go on, and the other kind when you just watch how your mind works. So you get to, you become familiar with how your mind works. And like the Master Tung Chiu said that if you know how your mind works, then it's much easier to practice. So sometimes in your meditation, that is what you will do. You follow your breathing and you just notice, this kind of thinking is coming up. This kind of feeling is coming up. And you can practice that not just sitting in the meditation hall, but while you're sitting waiting to begin your lunch, or while you're sitting waiting for the Dhamma sharing to begin. So there's nothing wrong with being early, by the way. Sometime in Thailand, the sisters say to me, sister, don't go yet, you'll be all on your own. So I say, okay, I don't mind being on my own. I can sit there, be on my own for a bit. At least I want to be a good example. So often I go to a Dhamma sharing, I'm sitting there in the circle on my own. But it's also a good opportunity. I can watch what is coming up in my mind. Every time something comes up, and then sometimes I don't even have time to finish one thing come up, and another thing will come up. So that is how my mind is. And once I understand my mind, it's much easier to take care of it. How can you take care of a child you don't understand? It's not easy. So keep it on the path, and so you can be released from the bondage of Mara. You know, in the discourse on the 8 realizations of great beings, we talk about the 4 kinds of Mara, and I can only remember 3. Klesha Mara, Mara of the phiền não, cái gì Skanda Mara, Mara of the 5 skandhas, Mrita Mara, Mara of death. What's the 4th Mara? Ai nhớ được không? Cho nó quên rồi. Hả? Thi Mara. Cái gì? Ai nói hả? Who said? Yeah. What is that in English? I've forgotten, huh? In English, anybody remember? Tiếng Anh là cái gì? Deva Mara, huh? Maybe. Mara is a kind of deva, huh? Mara is a god, huh? God, kind of spirit. Anyway, there's 4 kinds of Mara, and they put you like in a, when you get that kind of Mara, you get in the prison. Indolence is an obstacle. You must practice diligently. This is from the 8 realizations. To transform unwholesome states that bind you. That is Klesha Mara, the Mara of the unwholesome mental formations. And conquer the 4 kinds of Mara in order to free yourself from the prison of the 5 aggregates and the 3 worlds. So one kind of Mara is called the Skanda Mara, Mara of the 5 aggregates. Because that is when we are caught in the 5 aggregates of myself. I am my body, I am my feelings. That's one kind of Mara. When I believe that my 5 skandhas are me, and therefore if anybody says anything unkind about my 5 skandhas, I think that I'm being wounded or being hurt. Actually, the Buddha said, one day the Buddha was sitting in the Jeta Grove with his monks, and they were watching the gardener who was raking up the leaves and the fallen branches in order to make a fire, to burn them. And the Buddha said to the monks, when you see these leaves and branches being raked up and put on the fire, do you feel hurt? Do you feel wounded? And the monks said no. And the Buddha said, why? And it's because those leaves, those branches are not yourself, are not you. It's the same with the 5 skandhas. They are not yourself, they're not you. So if somebody says something unkind about the 5 skandhas, you don't have to feel hurt. Just remember that the leaves and the branches in the Jeta grove. So now we can practice mindfulness. In verse 6, we practice mindfulness so that stop the, unsuitable mind. Maybe this reminds me a little bit of one of the mental formations that is called Yoniso Manaskara. And that is newly taki, and the opposite is ayoniso manaskara. Newly taki. So when our mind receives so many sense impressions all at one time. At the same time, I hear the dog barking, I see the trees, and then many other things may be happening. I may feel the cold wind and many things happening at the same time. So we have this mental formation that is called manaskara, which we translate as what? Attention. So our mind has to choose something to attend to, because there are so many things coming into us. And therefore we can choose something that is appropriate, or we can choose something that is inappropriate. So guarding our mind is also mean to be aware, what am I giving my attention to? I have some feedback I haven't yet carried out. That is, I should walk around to stop people falling asleep. And then somebody else said, oh, you needn't walk around, you can sing a song. sing a song to some people. Life is not a program for tomorrow. Life is not a story from the past. Life is only real in this moment, and no theory will ever last. Life is not always thinking about what is right and what is wrong. Life is a matter of being, not doing something all day long. Life is not a matter of attaining something that lies far away. Life is not always complaining that happiness lies somewhere else. Okay, that's enough to wake you up. So the reason I sang that is because the line, life is not always complaining that happiness lies somewhere else, Is Thai say that is the best line in that song. I don't know about the other line. Is to remind me and not to do that. So this has to do with with right attention, appropriate attention. Not complain that happiness lies somewhere else, but be able to see that happiness is available right here and now. One time Thai said to me that the normal joy is okay. There's nothing wrong with the normal joy. Everyday kind of joy and happiness, nothing wrong with it. So maybe I had the tendency to think that happiness has to be something very deep, like nirvana or something like that. And if it's not nirvana, it's not worth not worth having. But happiness is also very deep. And there's two kinds of happiness. There's the kind of happiness that you need to remind yourself, and there's a happiness that comes up without you needing to remind yourself. And of course, it's much more pleasant to have happiness come up. You don't have to tell, look, I need to be aware, I have two good eyes. But we need to practice I need to practice happiness. The fact that I have two eyes, I can see the blue sky. It's a very deep happiness. I realize that my eyes, they're not there on their own. The eyes are only possible to see the blue sky because there is some kind of stimulus out there, the light waves, and something making that stimulus, the light waves, a certain length, making the light waves a certain length. And on top of that, there is my, what's it called? Visual cortex in my brain. It's like the eyes consciousness, which is making the blue sky. Actually, the color blue, our eyes can't pick it up because the wavelength of the light waves is too short. So actually, when there's white, when there is blue, it doesn't send any message to our visual cortex. So our visual cortex make up the color blue. Blue is my favorite, used to be my favorite, it's not anymore, I don't have a favorite color anymore. When I was a child, the children asked, what's your favorite color? You'd say blue. But anyway, blue is the blue sky, very, very, very deep, but it's actually being made up by my cortex. And also my eyes that are sending a message saying we can't pick up this wavelength. So seeing all those causes and conditions that make it possible for me to see is happiness because it's so wonderful. And that is the kind of happiness you get from recognizing how wonderful life is. So, yoniso manaskara, appropriate attention, means giving your attention to what can bring you happiness in the present moment. Like a mindful step. Mindful steps can bring a lot of happiness. If you're not mindful of your steps, you lose your steps. You lose the opportunity for the happiness from them. And here we talk about not being caught in extremes. So, yeah, the word being means extreme. And there is a kind of wrong perception, a view that is called extreme view. And that means that being and non-being, birth and death, same and different. These polar opposites, these pairs of opposites. So the realization of the ultimate dimension is not to be caught in extremes. In our daily life, in historical dimension, we have to talk about extremes. It's part of our language. Like we have to talk about birth and death and being and non-being and same and different. But we need in our daily life also to be able to touch the no birth and no death. Go on the middle way in order to be able to liberate our mind from those extremes. I think it may be that here a little bit, when they were translating, they in the Pali version it says the extremes of right and wrong, free from the extremes of right and wrong. So here they talk about merit and wrongdoing. I don't know if they translated it quite right. But anyway, we can understand that when we're not caught in extremes, when we're free of ideas of birth and death and being and non-being, there's a lot of merit and lead to the no wrongdoing in the absolute sense. Not being caught in extremes like that is the teaching in the Heart Sutra, the insight that leads to the other shore. And as it says there, that when we have that insight, we see insight of the Buddhas of the past, present and future. I think I've said enough, and I've been abstract enough and not concrete enough. So what I now want to do is, because I think I can keep you here for another 10 minutes, is to ask you if you have any questions. Okay, no question? Then I will talk some more. Sorry.
Dear Thai, dear Sukho, dear brothers and sisters, I have a question. If you could clarify the distinction between the idea of not forcing anything with the idea of being able to control and master yourself. So forcing, controlling, mastering is not very clear, and maybe it's subtle, but if you could clarify. Thank you.
Yeah, so if I think about my own experience, and when I talk about when I was in India and I was forcing myself, and I compare it with how I meditate now, then that's all I can talk about. So when I practice something, I want to do it for my. So I take the example of sitting meditation. When I come into the meditation hall, I know that what I want is relaxation, enjoyment, which will lead to concentration and insight. Because the insight is what helps me in my daily life. So when I come into the hall, I will suggest to myself the practice that I do. And sometimes a part of my mind will say, "Oh no, I don't want to do that." So I will say to that part of my mind, "Well, what do you want to do?" And that part of my mind will say, "Well, I don't know, but I don't want to do that." So then I kind of have this conversation with myself, and I say, "Come on, just try it." And so, okay, breathe in and try, and breathe in, and then, oh, it's okay, yeah, it actually... So we do have that kind of resistance sometimes. And we have a resistance to doing something that's new, that we haven't done before. And we need to talk to our resistance and try it out. When I force myself, I feel tired. I feel unwell in my body and my mind. But if I just resist some of my habit energies, it's a little bit difficult in the beginning. I have to make a bit of effort. But then I start enjoying it after not too long. So I don't know if that helps at all. And we do need to find everybody. It's another thing, this word "tu," which they repeat in the sutra, oneself. We have to do for ourselves. In the end, only we can deal with our own habit energies and difficulties, because everybody's brain is a little bit different. So everybody has to find the practices and the way of going into meditation that is best for that particular person. I don't think somebody else can give it to you. We'll all be a bit different.
Dạ, con kính thưa sư mẹ. Câu hỏi của con về cái sự thực tập thiền hướng dẫn. Dạ, có nhiều khi vào những cái buổi thực tập thiền hướng dẫn thì chẳng hạn giống nãy sư mẹ nói, khi mình vào thiền đường có thể mình có sẵn một cái đề tài cho mình về cái ngày hôm đó để mình có thể thực tập. Nhưng mà có cái bài thiền hướng dẫn ngày hôm đó đôi khi nó lại không có phù hợp với cái mà mình đang nghĩ về. Hoặc cũng có khi là mình biết trước ngày đó là có thiền hướng dẫn thì mình cũng không chuẩn bị gì hết, tại vì mình đâu biết cái người hướng dẫn họ sẽ chọn cái bài nào để cho mình thực tập theo. Thì mình ngồi ở đó và con nghĩ chắc là mình có khi nó phù hợp hoặc có khi nó không phù hợp, và con cũng không biết sư mẹ có thể chỉ dạy thêm là mình thực tập như thế nào để cho cái buổi thiền tập của mình nó có lợi lạc ở trong đó. Và nhiều khi có những cái suy nghĩ là thiền hướng dẫn đó làm cái đó chắc cho thiền sinh thôi, mình có thể tự làm cho mình một cái bài khác ngay trong cái buổi đó. Thì con sư mẹ dạy thêm cái đó cho con. Cảm ơn sư mẹ.
If we can all go together with a guided meditation, and we can all do it together, it's a very strong and powerful energy. And it depends partly on the person who is leading the guided meditation. If ever you're asked by your Sangha to lead a guided meditation, you need really to know what does the Sangha as a whole need, and what have I practiced successfully with fulfillment for myself, that I really felt that meditation helped me. So the person must have already practiced that. You can't come in and open the book and just do the guided meditation that you've never really practiced for yourself. And if the person guiding, I think, is really there with the people, has chosen something suitable, and is really had the experience of fulfillment in that meditation themselves, then I think that's half the problem is solved. But the other thing is the person guiding must be careful how they come into the meditation. Don't just start off saying something like, I don't know. Anyway, you have to start off by feeling in the hall, are people relaxed enough? And if you feel no, they're not relaxed, then you have to start off with breathing in. I know I'm breathing in. You always start off with breathing in. I know I'm breathing in, breathing out. I know I'm breathing out, or something similar. But breathing in, I smile to my body. Breathing out, I relax my body. And another thing I've noticed in guided meditation is that sometimes you have to change your idea at the last minute. I come in thinking, oh, today I'll do this meditation. You must come early. You should be there at least 15 minutes before and be meditating as the people come into the room. And then as they come in, you have the feeling, that won't do. I don't know where that feeling comes from, but you feel that's not right, that won't fit, and you have to change and do another meditation, which means you need all the guided meditations available for you. As for sitting in a meditation you feel that doesn't fit with you, that's a thought, that's an idea. So if you're guarding your mind, you will recognize, oh, the idea, the thought, this meditation doesn't fit me is coming up. And that thought itself can be a bit of an obstacle, because although the first few sentences didn't fit you, that after that they may do. So I don't know what to do. You just keep following your breathing. You keep listening to the voice of the person guiding. And you do your best to contribute your energy of peace and joy to the Sangha. And sometimes, I must admit, in the past, I have closed my ears. Not literally, but I really feel this meditation is not nourishing me, and therefore I'm not giving nourishing energy to the Sangha, so I just don't listen anymore, and I follow my breathing, and I do the first 4 exercises of the Anapanasati. But it's not very often I've done that. It's quite rare. So if you do that every time, or you do it often, maybe you need to be looking at how you can try and adapt better. Another thing I do when I come into the meditation hall, I want to be in touch with the collective energy. So I say, breathing in, now I only have 2 sisters in the Phượng. Sister A, I'm here for you. Breathing out, I'm here for you. And then I say, Sister B, I'm here for you. And then I say, breathing in, Sister A, you're here for me, you're breathing for me. And Sister B, you're breathing for me. And so I can feel that we're doing it together. So this also might help you not to feel when we do collective sitting meditation, not to feel that you're a separate self, but that you're part of a body doing it together, supporting each other.